Is this kind of arrangement between a worker and their employer really voluntary? In 2002, Saddam Hussein was elected the leader of Iraq with 100...
That's pretty interesting. Hello, how are you? I was watching this non-compete video on YouTube. The guy makes some pretty creative videos. I think he's an anarchist, communist, socialist, everything like that kind of guy. The kind of guy that you're all afraid of. But he really does interesting videos, taking a look at the world in a slightly different way, a little bit different than most people maintain as their own particular narrative that they identify with. Which brings me to a pet peeve that I have. When people talk to you as if their own cultural narrative, the one that they've learned somehow from their schooling and their parents and their culture and the books they've read and whatever, is the most important cultural narrative the world has ever seen. You know? I mean, everything about it. Its socioeconomic structure, its beliefs, and mythologies, its heroic past, its people, race, whatever. I mean, you know, it all goes in like that. And I think, well, yeah, but, you know, over the centuries, there's been all kinds of different things. Many different empires. None of them lasted forever. Think about the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte and what happened to him at the end of the day. I mean, he went pretty far, but he really didn't care about people that much. And he just went too far, and it nipped him in the butt. And he died alone on an island in the middle of the Atlantic. But we all know who he is, right? And so some people in France might think he's great. And some might think, no, he was terrible. He wrecked the world. We had a revolution, then we had to have another revolution after we got rid of Napoleon Bonaparte. And other people might say, well, Mao Zedong, he's a hero. Well, why? Some people think so, some people don't. Why did somebody kill JFK and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? Why did they have to die? Which brings me back to historical counterfactual imagination. And I think people who have that kind of narrow, it's all about me, my point of view, my perspective on the world, have a lack of that counterfactual, historical imagination. They can't imagine what life might have been like if something else had happened. It's too metacognitive, thinking about why you're thinking that way. Where did I get those ideas? Was it Steven Pinker's recent book, or was it all those Niall Ferguson books I read? Anyway, you got it from somewhere, and now you think it's everything. And you comb through books and entertainment and YouTube videos that, you know, support your belief, which is fine. Everybody does that. And then when you're on Facebook, you just say, Gandhi was a piece of garbage. He wrecked the whole wide world. He was the cause of the partition. Gandhi and all his nonsense. But he wasn't there. Did that person sacrifice himself like Gandhi did to try to change things for the better for his people? I mean, like him or not, he did some pretty heroic stuff. And that's the way it is. You always have people who have one point of view of Chiang Kai-shek and, you know, the Meiji Reformation and how we handled Native Americans, settlers from Europe. And they tend to forget that people from any region of the world, the African continent, South America, before European settlement, India, China, Europe, we're all pretty good at killing ourselves, killing each other, going to war over whatever, religious reasons, ideological reasons, just for money and power. And usually it's the common people that are being used by more powerful people. And what is it that makes the more powerful people more powerful, usually? It's that narrative. It's that story they tell about Christianity, or about Islam, or a Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, you know, whatever it is. You've got your stories, and your people understand what your stories are and believe in your stories and fight for your stories. That's what major civilization is all about. So you have your story and somebody else has their story. Is there anything we can learn from each other's stories so that we can gain a counterfactual imagination about the future? Because if we don't start thinking about that, there are existential threats to our future that could, let's say, eliminate our future. And I wouldn't like to see that happen. People with imagination, people who cared about other people, made it possible for me to be alive and live my mansplaining baby boomer life for all these years. If we don't start working together across cultures, collaborating among nations to solve problems like climate change and getting rid of nuclear weapons and things like this that are really quite important, antibiotic resistance, global pandemics, inequality. See, maybe the narratives or the ideologies that you learned, your socioeconomic or political or religious or whatever, maybe they're not optimum. Maybe if you criticize them a bit every now and then, read some critique about your beliefs, you might expand your point of view and your perspective and gain a lot more imagination. And that's a wonderful thing to have if you want to have a future. Because maybe what we have right now, this particular kind of economic structure and scheme, isn't the best one if we want to have a future. If we want other human beings to have a chance at life, at discovery, at telling stories, at doing heroic things, or at simply living a fairly happy, flourishing life. If you don't care about that, that's okay. A lot of people also say, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just an individual. In the face of nuclear weapons and climate change or whatever, there's nothing I can do. Well, I just think you have a lack of imagination, because there are lots of things, great and small, that any individual can do. And in particular, those acts become more powerful when they are collectivized, or when people get together in teams, or when they create institutions that work at solving problems. When they work cross-culturally, when they work on an international basis to solve a problem, a lot of resources come to bear. Also, if you weren't doing meaningless things for a tiny amount of money, things that you don't even care about, you might put your energy into doing something great that you really loved. And you might do that just for the sake of doing it, because you loved it. I was listening to this physicist talk about quantum gravity and so on. My God, you know, you do that kind of stuff for the love of it. But the invention that comes out of that understanding and knowledge is amazing. He said, before you criticize knowledge, you have to know it. And there's a lot of things we don't know. We just take our story, our narrative for granted. So I think reaching outside of your comfort zone all the time, across domains of interest and knowledge, is a great thing to do. And just clicking up with people who are ideologically like you and sticking up for yourself in social media, where you can't really have a face-to-face conversation or argument where you can establish prior understandings and beliefs and maybe some overlap in what you agree on, and then take it from there. What do you know? What have you read? Where have you been? Where does your information come from? This is what I understand about it. If you were going to learn about auto mechanics or how to make a paper airplane, you'd ask somebody who knew how to do that to teach you, right? And yet we think we know everything about economics and politics. And we think the status quo is just going to take us right into the future. I don't think it will. We're going to need lots of people with an imagination. And leave Greta alone, you right-wing meanies. She's a child and she wants a future. So she's trying to confront the status quo. Institutions, people who just want to make money. That's it. And she's trying to tell them, you're going to have to do more than that if people like me are going to have a future. Just lay off. These young people have to stand up for themselves now because we won't. We don't have the guts. None of us are going to be Gandhi. We don't have the strength to do Martin Luther King. We have screens. We have diversion. We have entertainment. We have Netflix. We have so many things. We have retail therapy. We have drugs. I mean, why bother, right? Well, people are going to bother because inequality is a big problem. And climate change is happening and has been happening for a long time, and it's going to happen faster. And it's going to force a lot of changes in the world. And if anybody wants to have a slightly nice future, really, you're going to have to fulfill yourself in what you do and the attitude you take towards what you do and how you deal with other people, other human beings, because that's all we've got. And if you can love that life that you're living and presenting, love those relationships you have. I know, it's cliche. Everybody says that. But that's really all there is. And if you can do that in the right way moving forward, you might die with a smile on your face knowing that you tried to make things nice. That's all progress is. I don't know what conservatives are trying to conserve. Everything always changes. Take any conservative party from any country. Are they exactly the way they were 100 years ago or 50 years ago? No, they're not. Everything's always changing. I think progressive people just want to see a little bit of progress over time. And incrementalism can be enough sometimes, but sometimes it's not enough. And I think the existential threats we're facing today require a lot more than incrementalism. We need some radical movement, and for that we need to have an imagination that goes against the grain, against the status quo. There are good things about Western civilization, of course. And there are good things about Christianity and Islam, of course. But it's not all good. And democracy, however you define it, is not all good. And socialism, however you define it, is not all good. And most of these things, however you define it, we've never experienced in reality. They're just ideas. Anyway, I want people to have an imagination. Don't be so... Relax a little. When somebody quotes Jesus, don't say, hey, you stupid religious moron. Maybe the person's just quoting something that Jesus said that sounds kind of good. Not everything is Benjamin Franklin, right? Or George Washington, or name your guy. Robespierre. You want to quote him? Go ahead, I don't care. Maybe he said something that was kind of good when he was cutting off all those heads. Let's get an imagination and let's enjoy life, because this is it. This is all we've got. And thank you if you made it through this disjointed conversation. I appreciate it. It's a duologue, really. I'm talking to a camera. But anyway, I didn't write anything down. I was just stewing on it for a while. I wanted to say something. And enjoy yourselves. Everything's still working, so have a great day. Be nice to your friends. Be good to yourself, and I'll talk to you again soon.